Church-Peveril in Yorkshire was a house so beset and frequented by spectres, both visible and audible, that none of the family living there took psychic phenomena with any seriousness. For the Peverils, the appearance of a ghost was a matter of no greater significance than the arrival of the post, an everyday occasion which knocks, makes other noises, or is observed coming up the drive or elsewhere. Edward, who sometimes stayed there, often heard family members casually discussing some observed appearance, such as the Blue Lady, for example, in the hope that she would not frighten one of the pet Dachshunds. Mrs. Peveril and her daughter Blanche would comment on poor blue Aunt Barbara being a bore, as she never spoke but only pointed somewhere towards the house. They felt that she wanted to confess about something that happened 200 years ago, but had forgotten what it was, and she would wear that dreary shade of blue. The family harboured no unkindness, but sometimes amusement and a kind of pity for their habitual visitants. They were quite fond of a Master Anthony, who had met his end vainly attempting to ride his horse up the main staircase after some monstrous deed in the back garden. The reportedly foul ruffian was renowned throughout the countryside and could often become very loud during the night. Favoured visitors would sometimes be assigned a bedroom frequented by defunct members of the family, such as great-great-grandmama Bridget, who hovered around a particular fireplace and was best not approached due to some unpleasant activities involving an axe during her last days. However, there was one haunting at Church-Peveril which the family did not take lightly, and was spoken of only as much as was needed for the safety of their guests. It actually involved the appearance of two ghosts, two very young children who were twins. Not without reason, the family took their presence very seriously, which Mrs. Peveril had explained to Edward as follows. In 1602, the last year of Queen Elizabeth I's reign, a certain Dick Peveril was greatly in favour at court. He was brother to Master Joseph Peveril, then owner of the family house and lands, who 2 years previously had become father of twin boys, firstborn of his progeny and his heirs. The story goes that the monarch suggested to the handsome Dick that it was a pity that he was not the master of Church-Peveril, perhaps planting the seed of his sinister design. Dick set off to ride north to Yorkshire, where he found that, conveniently, his ageing brother Joseph had been seized by incapacity due to overconsumption of a rough wine, and had passed away. Dick arrived at Church-Peveril just in time for his brother's funeral. Julie attended the obsequies and stayed with his widow sister-in-law to offer sympathy in her mourning. However, on the second night of his stay, he did something that the Peverils regret and condemn to this day. He entered the room where the twins slept and quietly dispatched their nurse. The same fate awaited the two small boys, whose remains were later found in the fireplace, which now warms the long gallery. It was said that Dick had laughed as he added more logs to the blaze, whereby he became master of Church-Peveril. Dick's portrait still remains above the fireplace in the long gallery, and while he was never held to account for his crimes, he lived no longer than a year in the enjoyment of his blood-stained inheritance. On his deathbed, he made his confession to the priest who attended him, but his spirit struggled forth before absolution could be given him. On that very night, there began in Church-Peveril the haunting which thereafter was seldom spoken of by the family, and only then in sombre, hushed tones. For, only an hour or two after Dick's demise, one of the servants passing the door of the gallery heard from within loud peals of his sinister laughter. In mortal terror, the man opened the door, expecting to see Dick's dreaded manifestation, but instead saw two little white-robed figures toddling towards him, hand in hand, across the moonlit floor. The servant was found lying in the grip of some terrible convulsion, and was able to describe the apparition before expiring with a terrified scream. During the next 50 years, the strange and terrible legend of the twin babies was confirmed by rare but regular sightings. On each occasion they appeared between sunset and sunrise, always in the same long gallery, and always as two toddling children barely able to walk. And on each occasion the luckless individual who saw them met their own end, either speedily or within a few months. The speedy ones were lucky, unlike a certain Mrs. Canning in 1760, who was sceptical and decided to investigate the haunted place. She sat in the gallery every evening for 4 nights seeing nothing, until on the 5th the gallery door opened and there came toddling towards her the ill-omened innocent little pair. Not even frightened, the steely young woman mocked at them, telling them it was time to get back into the fire. The spectres gave no reply, but turned away from her, crying and sobbing. Mrs. Canning triumphantly announced to the family downstairs that she had witnessed the spirit forms, and would write to her fellow sceptics and make them laugh at her antic. However, there was no laughter when they heard her fate. A fortnight later, Mrs. Canning, a beauty of her day and admired for her brilliant complexion, was dismayed to find one morning a greyish patch on her left cheek. No cream or treatment removed the patch, which soon doubled in size and developed lichen-like tendrils spreading to other areas of her face. Filaments formed beneath her eyelids, obscuring her vision, and then her tongue and throat were attacked, soon fatally suppressing her breath. More terrible yet was the case of a certain Colonel Blantyre, who fired his weapon on the ghosts. What he went through, Mrs. Peveril did not even want to describe to the shocked Edward. As a result, every guest in the Peveril house was scrupulously informed that the long gallery must not be entered into after nightfall for any reason whatsoever. There lay the door through which the handsome Dick brought the children and the fireplace into which he thrust them. It was in the long gallery that they always appeared, and where Dick's harsh, jovial laugh was always heard. While a busy, cheerful place during the day, the long gallery was always hushed and deserted after sunset. At the time of Edward's stay, a large party of Christmas guests was holidaying at Church-Peveril, even overflowing to the local inn. The lake below the house had iced over, so many were enjoying skating throughout the day. However, one guest, Madge Dalrymple, who was Blanche's cousin, had unfortunately fallen and hoped that resting her injured knee would enable her to dance that evening. The group saw Madge comfortably reclined before the open fire in the long gallery and left with a reminder that she not cut it too fine and be out of the room before sunset. Madge alternately read her book and thought of writing to her mother of the recent spirit sightings in the house. Master Anthony had been active 2 nights ago, and the Blue Lady had been seen to enter the stables and frighten the horses. Feeling warm and drowsy, Madge soon found herself in a dream state, which turned into a nightmare as she felt herself engulfed in Mrs. Canning's horrific lichen. Making a conscious effort, she awoke with tremendous relief. As she lay there still dozing, handsome Dick's portrait staring evilly down on her, an even worse panic seized her. Daylight had faded. She was alone in the dark in the terrible gallery, and she knew with the certainty of absolute conviction that she was about to see the twin babies. Hope revived in her heart when she realised that the sky was overcast and that it was not yet night, but springing off the sofa, she found herself lost in the dark, blocked in by furniture. Groping around in a panic, she felt that all that remained to her was to pray, and heard her voice rising from whisper to speech, from speech to a scream, as she then shrieked out the holy words. As the fire sputtered briefly, she could see where the door handle was, where one swift dart would take her across the room, to the landing and the staircase, and into safety. Then there came a little whisper from the door, which she could see was opening. There stood 2 little white figures, side by side. They slowly came towards her, shuffling, ghosts of terror who were innocent of the awful doom they were bound to bring. She instantly decided what to do. If she entreated them, they might have mercy and forbear to bring the curse on her. She sank to her knees and stretched out her hands as the enlightenment of pity dawned on her. She would not dread, fear, or mock the innocent little spirits on whom so awful a doom was laid. "Dears, I am so sorry for you," she said, and continued to talk to the pair and ask God to bless them. In the darkness she could now see their faces, but they were not miserable or fierce. The infant boys smiled at her with shy little baby smiles. As she looked, they grew faint, fading slowly away like wreaths of vapour in frosty air. Madge's fear had been replaced by a wonderful feeling of peace and serenity, and when she met the other guests coming upstairs from skating, they commented that she was no longer limping. Madge saw Blanche's face whiten with terror when she told her that she had just seen the twins, but she said they were kind, they smiled, and Madge felt sorry for them, and somehow she was sure she had nothing to fear. Edward later reported that Madge was right, as nothing bad had happened to her. He supposed that her attitude to the twin ghosts, her pity, her sympathy, touched and dissolved and annihilated the curse. He had recently again visited Church-Peveril, arriving after dark, and then meeting Blanche coming out the gallery door. She told him that she had just been seeing the twins, who had looked very sweet and stayed for 10 minutes. After all, they were family. She then invited him in for tea in the once again busy long gallery.